We're going to just keep on walking along here on Health Talk, and without going to a break, we're going to go to Robert Mazur, who is about to chat with us about America's losing effort in the war on drugs. Robert, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, so you have an interesting CV here. Risked your life to pose as a money launderer. You worked behind the scenes here to try to fight the drug trade. How did that all come to be?
Really by accident. I was a college student looking to make a little money on the side, and I was a business administration finance major with an emphasis in accounting, and I thought I was going to be a widget counter for a CPA firm. But there was a co-op job that was offered by a law enforcement agency, so I accepted that. It was actually what's now known as the Criminal Investigation Division of IRS. And I was completely enthralled with what they were doing. As they explained to me, they were the people who crunched the numbers and got the evidence that helped in the prosecution of Al Capone. And they were going after major organized crime figures, corrupt politicians, drug traffickers on the unreported illegal income side of prosecuting, which is an important one. It's a very important forensic accounting instruction that I got as I decided to get more and more involved, and I was invited to take on a full-time job as a special agent with IRS after I graduated. And I did that for 11 years, and then switched over to what's now Homeland Security Investigations, and was given the opportunity to use those talents to work long-term undercover, and accepted a position after being trained properly for it to be a money launderer for the Colombian cartels.
So, okay, now wait a minute. So you're an American, and you wound up working for the Colombian cartels. Were you based here, or did you have to go to Caracas or whatever? Or that's Venezuela.
No.
I mean,
based in the United States, and long-term undercover operations out of the United States oftentimes deal with people who are in foreign countries committing crimes in our country. And in this instance, at the time, Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel were probably one of the major threats to our nation. And I was asked to come up with an idea on how to penetrate that organization, through the money laundering side. And I drew up a long-term undercover operational plan after I was trained to be a long-term undercover agent. And we enacted that. And really, at the height of the operation, I have to say, there were probably 250 law enforcement officers outside and within the United States who were helping to keep me and my partner alive as we worked for years within the Medellin cartel as money launderers, collecting the evidence that led to the prosecution of more than 100 drug traffickers, money launderers, and even what was then the seventh largest privately held bank in the world.
So this is in the 80s and 90s when the international drug trade was probably a tiny fraction of what it is these days. But still, there came a time when you felt pretty scared about what your chosen avocation was. So you changed your identity more than once. What was the first? Tell us about the first time that you felt like, wow, I've really made some dangerous choices here.
Well, really, that was about a month after the end of the first long-term undercover assignment that I did, the one that caused me to get to deal with a lot of people who were direct reports to Pablo Escobar. About a month after that undercover operation, during the court, in the U.S. law enforcement, you've got to disclose the real names of your witnesses, and so the defense attorneys and defendants learned what my real name was, and about 30 days after they were made aware of that, I learned through witnesses that were interviewed by two law enforcement agencies, as well as evidence from a NSA foreign intercept, that there was a contract on my life. And so it was very, very clear at that point, and I knew that was going to happen, frankly, because I had developed another false identity in anticipation of that type of problem, so that my family and I could attempt to live as normal a life as possible within that realm of craziness. And so we had to go underground, and we did for years, which was very difficult for my wife and my kids. When I first started working long-term undercover, my kids were 9 and 11, 11 and 13 when that first assignment was over. And for years, we had to take extra security precautions because of the threats. And that was difficult for them because I was traveling all over the world, testifying in trials. And even though they had to deal with that threat, I wasn't as close to them as I really wanted to be because I had to prepare for extensive testimony in trials, the longest of which was 6 months, and I was on the witness stand in that case from the middle of March to the middle of June. So for 3 months, every single day, I was in the witness stand, testifying in a courtroom jam-packed with observers and family and defendants that I had dealt with in the undercover world who, until my identity was revealed, thought I was one of their close friends.
Robert Mazur is our guest here on Health Talk, talking about America's losing effort in the war on drugs. Introduce you, Robert, to Dr. Ralph Viola from Eyes on Rochester.
Yeah, hi. We always say art imitates life, and we're talking about all this stuff happening to you back in the 80s and 90s, and I can't help but remember a TV show I used to watch all the time, Miami Vice, which highlighted the Colombian drug cartels and all that bad stuff. And, there were always, good cops and bad cops, and there were undercover agents that were double agents and all this stuff. And so, I always assumed that stuff was real because, again, art imitates life. You lived it. So have you been through those scenarios where there were, apparently U.S. agents that were double agents and, you may have accidentally put your life in danger because you trusted someone you shouldn't have trusted, that kind of thing? Or is a lot of that just Hollywood nonsense?
It's not Hollywood nonsense. Unfortunately, there are a lot of long-term undercover agents who aren't trained properly and aren't psychologically prepared for the ordeals of living a double life for years on end that go down the slippery slope and make some very, very bad decisions that cause them to lose their careers, their families, and sometimes their freedom. And I recently wrote a book, the second one. The first was The Infiltrator, that became a film starring Bryan Cranston, and now a book I wrote called The Betrayal. In the second undercover operation, unfortunately, there was a mole within the Drug Enforcement Administration who, during the course of a deep undercover operation, outed me to the leaders of the Cali Cartel, for whom I was laundering drug proceeds in an undercover capacity. And so, no, that's very, very real. I personally know, I can probably say at least 5 or so undercover agents who have made horrific decisions in their lives that have led them to lose their freedom. And we have to recognize that, unfortunately, corruption is not something that is somehow attached to a particular nationality. It's a human factor. And unfortunately, there are people in our country and many other countries that have fallen victim to those problems, and more within the United States than we really know, because the typical tactic by law enforcement agencies is to sweep that under the rug as quickly as they can, because they don't think that the American public is mature enough to wrestle mentally with the thought that there could be individual rogues within agencies, and they're so concerned about it being a blemish on the agency itself. We could learn so much more by having an open book about those things and really using those as instructional things for the law enforcement officers of the future. And I do that with my personal problem that I dealt with in almost getting killed at the hands of a colleague when I get the opportunity occasionally to deal with up-and-coming candidates for undercover work within law enforcement agencies. And I think it's so important for me to share with them the very fundamental things that in hindsight I see that related to that particular individual, and the data points that would have, had the agencies taken that type of a problem seriously, been able to easily identify and cut it long before it became a major problem.
Talking with Robert Mazur, and he's talking about the war on drugs and how we're doing with it, which my sense is not as well as we should. Dr. Paul Sussman.
So from all the information that you gathered and your experiences, do you have suggestions of how local agencies or what could be done to help fight this war?
Yeah, there's so many points, Doctor, that we need to address. But one of the very most fundamental, in my view, is that when we step back and we take a very serious look at the amount of resources that we apply to the supply side of the problem versus the demand side of the problem, I think we are very, very behind the eight ball here in what we should be doing on the demand side. I do believe that we can improve education with respect to the ills of taking illegal drugs and with drug treatment. Those are two major problems I happen to have because of certain events that occurred in my family, a very personal knowledge about how difficult it is to find beds for people who have drug addictions. But even more importantly, and something that I don't hear too many people talking about, is I think the reality that there are segments of our underserved, underprivileged communities that do not get adequate resources for education and employment. And we need to look much more closely at the demand side. I remember many times talking to people who were in command and control within the cartels who would jokingly say, there'd be no supply if there was no demand. And there's a lot to be said for the truth of that fact. And I do believe that there are many things that we can do to try to strengthen the three legs of the stool in drug addiction education, in drug treatment, and most importantly, education that should be provided to people who are within underserved, underprivileged communities. My parents were born in the 1920s, and at that time, education was free through high school. And today, 100 years later, education is free through high school. And I know we always talk about where's the money going to come from, but let me say that in some states, it costs as much as $67,000 a year to house an inmate. And if that inmate had been caught way, way earlier in the curve, and we spent what might be $6,000 a year toward a state college education.
Yeah. Robert, you know something? I'm sorry, we got to leave it there because we're running out of time here on the segment. But tell us really quickly, I'll give you 15 seconds. You have a book, The Betrayal. Where's that available, and what's that about?
Okay, go to Robert Mazur, no space, Mazur.com. Go to the Betrayal tab and click on that, and you'll find out where you can get it on Amazon.com. It is focused upon the last undercover operation I did that nearly got me killed because of a corrupt officer within our department.
All right. Appreciate you taking the time to be on Health Talk here. Glad you're safe. And I'm not even sure that Robert Mazur is your name, but that doesn't matter to me. Good luck to you, and thanks for all your hard work and for taking one for all of the rest of us.
Well, thank you for your service to the community and getting word out about many different things.
Yep, well, that's what we try to do. Appreciate that. Robert Mazur, who is the author of The Betrayal. Get it on Amazon.com. Let's do our shameless plugs. Ralph, you go first.
Eyes on Rochester, full-service eye care, medical and routine eye exams, cataract surgery, glasses, contact lenses, 1157 Fairport Road between Marsh and Baird, 585-586-9900, or eyesonrochester.com.
And Dr. Paul Sussman.
The Center for Cosmetic Dentistry, 34 Buckman Road, Rochester, off of Ridge Road near 390. All areas of dentistry, dental implants, smile makeovers. Call us at 227-6453. Center for Cosmetic Dentist.com on the web.
All right, thanks for listening. See you next time on Health Talk.